Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unraveling the absolutely bizarre, true story of how a tropical pet trade escapee somehow managed to conquer freezing concrete cities and quite literally hold the electrical grid hostage. It's a wildly fascinating look at nature's adaptability and our own unintentional role in shaping it.
So let's just jump right in with the most obvious question, right? How on earth are colorful, warm weather parrots not only surviving brutal blizzards, but also causing millions of dollars in infrastructure damage? I mean, it sounds like the plot of a weird sci-fi movie, but it's a very real, very expensive reality for several major cities.
Part 1. The Tropical Urban Invader. To figure this out, we've got to track the wild journey of our main culprit, the monk parakeet.
Originally from South America, think southern Brazil down to central Argentina, these bright green, blue-winged birds were brought to the U.S. in the 1960s for the pet trade. Naturally, some escaped, and others were just intentionally released. But instead of freezing to death in the harsh winters of places like New York and Chicago, or over in European cities like Barcelona, they thrived. They established rapidly growing, wild breeding populations right smack in the middle of our most crowded urban centers.
Well, a big part of that survival comes down to their architectural skills. Unlike your average parrot that just camps out inside an existing tree cavity, the monk parakeet is a total master builder. They're actually one of only 3 known parrot species to build stick nests, and literally the only one to use them exclusively. They build these massive, multi-chamber communal stick structures that they live in year-round, which provides crucial shelter against freezing winter temps.
Section 2, Keys to Urban Survival. Because, let's be honest, shelter alone doesn't entirely explain a population boom. How exactly are they thriving in places that should be way too cold and hostile for them?
The 2012 scientific study out of Barcelona actually gathered some fascinating data on this. The findings perfectly illustrate what scientists called the human activity hypotheses for invasive species. Basically, instead of just looking for a climate that perfectly matches their home, these birds look for environments heavily modified by humans.
By mapping out the parakeet nests across Barcelona's 73 neighborhoods, researchers found 2 very specific, statistically significant keys to their urban success. First, high tree density, giving them food and structural support for those massive nests. And second, somewhat surprisingly, neighborhoods with a high percentage of people over the age of 65. Why? Because older populations in these areas frequently take the time to feed the birds. We are literally handing them the extra calories they need to survive the cold.
Part 3. The Power Grid Problem. All this accidental human assistance has allowed the parakeets to rapidly multiply, and that leads us straight into a massive infrastructural conflict. Here's where things get crazy. These tightly intertwined stick nests aren't just large, they are monumental. Because they build them communally, sometimes adding up to 20 different chambers for multiple breeding pairs, a single nest structure can weigh a staggering 200 pounds or more.
So picture this, a 200-pound pile of dry sticks balancing right on top of a utility pole. The parakeets often actually choose these human-made structures over trees. As the colony expands the nest, the sticks eventually bridge the gap between live electrical lines. This inevitably causes a short circuit, blows the transformer, and boom, widespread sudden blackouts for entire neighborhoods.
And the stakes here? They're shockingly high. We aren't just talking about a minor nuisance. In Florida alone, utility companies were forced to remove 3,000 of these nests over a 5-year period. The cost to do that? An estimated $4.7 million.
But here is the absolute craziest part. Nothing worked to stop them. Utilities tried installing fake owl decoys on the poles, and the parakeets just totally ignored them. When crews painstakingly removed the 200-pound nests, the birds simply flew right back and started rebuilding them immediately. With lethal control being super unpopular and nest removals being wildly expensive, utilities were stuck in a multi-million-dollar loop.
Section 4. A scientific stakeout. Facing a totally relentless and frankly stubborn enemy, researchers from the University of Connecticut realized they had to change tactics. They ran a literal stakeout to figure out exactly how these birds were building on the poles. Researchers watched the birds from the very beginning of the nest building process, and they uncovered a physical limitation. Because the parakeets need their sharply hooked beaks to climb up or down the utility pole to find the exact attachment point. They can't just fly directly to the pole with a stick in their mouth. Instead, step 1, they have to land on the live electrical wire. Step 2, they physically walk along the wire toward the pole. And step 3, they use their beak to maneuver the stick into place. And this part just perfectly captures their bizarre persistence, along with a kind of comical lack of problem solving. During this tightrope walk, if a parakeet happens to drop a twig, it won't just bend down or fly to the ground to pick it up. Nope. It abandons the drop stick entirely, flies all the way back to a tree, snaps off a fresh branch, and starts the entire process over again.
Dr. Margaret Rebecca, the Connecticut state ornithologist who actually oversaw this study, had a hilarious way of describing it. She noted that when you watch them, they look exactly like a guy walking a gangplank with a stick in his mouth. They are essentially tiny, green pirates walking a tightrope just to sabotage the power grid.
Part 5. Outsmarting the parakeets. Believe it or not, this one weird little behavioral quirk observed during the stakeout ended up unlocking the solution to the entire multi-million-dollar problem.
Think about it. If the birds absolutely have to use the wire as a walkway because they need their beaks to climb, the solution becomes incredibly clear. You don't need to remove the nest, and you definitely don't need to harm the birds. You simply install a device that blocks just the final foot of the wire right before it meets the pole.
This amazingly simple, non-lethal fix literally stops the problem before it even begins. By just denying them that last foot of runway, utility companies eliminate the need for costly removals, prevent dangerous transformer fires, and keep the blackouts at bay. It forces the parrots to just reroute back to the trees, promoting a perfectly safe coexistence between our human infrastructure and our new, colorful neighbors.
It's such an elegant fix to a ridiculously complex problem. And, it leaves us with a really fascinating thought to wrap up this explainer. As we keep constructing our modern world, paving over nature with concrete and power lines, are we just building habitats for ourselves? Or are we inadvertently building the perfect sanctuaries for nature's most resourceful survivors? Next time you see a flock of wild parrots thriving in a snowy city, you'll know exactly who is really adapting to whom. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep your eyes on the skies and, of course, the power lines.